Here's Monmatia. And Monmatia begins, of course, with Mercury, go to Venus, and oh my, look what we got here. It's the world of the cross, Urantia, the sentimental shrine of old Lebanon. The Cosmogony of Monmatia, the origin of our solar system. Now, the purpose of this study is to present anticipatory theories that will possibly merge some aspects of current astrophysics with epochal revelation concerning the cosmogony of Monmatia. We are seeing over the last 100 years how epochal revelation and current science are slowly but surely converging. Science has many, many different ideas about the origin of our solar system. And the Urantia Book is like a puzzle. It has puzzle pieces for us to put together exactly what's going on as it comports with science, current science. This study is based on the belief that the cosmogony of the Urantia Book is correct concerning the formation of the asteroid belt from planet 5 and the Angona extrusion of our 12 solar system planets. So, what this really is taken from is from paper 57, pretty exclusively, sections 5 and 6. It's amazing how much information is packed into those two sections. Now, I must admit right off the bat that the Urantia Book is correct when it says that anytime we come up with a framework, we are going to be correct in a greater or lesser degree. And that is very, very humbling when you look at the magnitude of the science that we have been looking at. And so there's probably going to be some confirmation bias in what I have to say, and I hope I'm called out on that. Now, remember how Gard really made the point about how progress occurs through science and philosophy, and that's exactly what's happened here with our solar system. Of course, well, Gard talked about Ptolemy, that geocentric 4th century AD philosopher whose solar system model lasted for about 1,500 years. Copernicus finally came up with a heliocentric concept in the 16th century. Well, Giordano Bruno agreed with him. But gee, he said, hey, he had a lot of courage. He said, hey, all those stars out there are just like our sun, and they have planets orbiting around them. Well, you know what happened to him? He got burned at the stake. Well, luckily, I don't think I'm going to get burned at the stake for what I'm doing, but gee, what a tough life. Well, Tycho Brahe, he had a hybrid of the heliocentric. And then Buffon, he had the comet theory. He thought that a comet came by and pulled out all the planets, which is, it's getting close. Now, Laplace, probably the greatest mathematician that's ever, at least top 5 mathematicians in history, he came up with basically the idea of the solar system is formed from gas and dust that's orbiting the sun, which clump together to form the planets. And as the sun cooled and contracted, it flattened and spun out more rapidly, throwing off and shedding gaseous rings of material. And all those planets condensed from this material. So we see that's sort of basically the foundation of what is seen today, which is the planetesimal accretion. The planetesimal accretion. But first, James John expanded that Chamberlain-Moulton theory, and I'm going to get into him later. The capture theory is more common today as a passing star just left its remains as the planets. And this is not an Angona concept. But the planetesimal accretion is the current theory that most scientists support. So let's get into let's give a simple overview of what we got here. Here's Monmatia. And Monmatia begins, of course, with Mercury. Go to Venus. And oh my, look what we got here. It's the world of the cross. Urantia, the sentimental shrine of old Lebanon, the chief of 10 million inhabited worlds, the mortal home of Christ Michael, sovereign of all Lebanon, and the planetary prince of Urantia. Now, how do we get so lucky, or unfortunate, however you look at it, to be on this crazy planet? Well, I think it's a blessing. And I'm so blessed to be here with you all and to enjoy this great migration to paradise that we're taking today. I want to talk about what's made up here of Monmatia. Here is the asteroid belt, and the asteroid belt, and then we go on to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and then there's Neptune. And here are the cold classicals, and I'll describe that later. The cold classical Kuiper Belt, and there in this corner is the Oort cloud, probably remnants from Angona, but it's a mystery. Oort cloud is where the long-term comets come from. Now, the short-term comets come from the asteroid belt. And basically, the asteroid, and what's interesting, you have to realize that there is a freeze line. The freeze line in Monmatia, and the freeze line basically is right along the asteroid belt. And so anything beyond the asteroid belt, the gases can sublimate ammonia, water ice, the frozen volatiles like methane. They all can sublimate out there very easily. Now, the asteroid belt is very rocky. It doesn't have the comet potential that the asteroid belt has because it's a lot closer to the sun, and as a result, whatever happened with the dissolution, the disruption of Planet 5 has pretty well thawed all of the asteroid belt to the point where it's very, very, very rocky. Well, what also is to say is that, there's an estimated 100,000 to 200,000 objects that are in this belt, and just countless small icy bodies. But there's sort of an overview now of Monmatia. Next, we move on to something that really thrills me. These are my 4 favorite telescopes. There has been an exponential growth in astronomy in the last 25 years. Actually, since Hubble did his work. We are now in a golden age of astronomy. It's incredible what's happening right now. There are so many radio, X-ray telescopic arrays, and just dozens of mini optical telescopes. So, among these 4, which ones do you favor? Which ones do you think are your favorites? Well, I'll tell you what mine is. Ooh, the Vera Rubin telescope. It is the Sphinx of astronomy. Look at that. It is so gorgeous. It is so huge. It is so beautiful. I get really emotional about it. And I'll tell you why. It's because it is the most amazing telescope that has ever been built. And I think that even swamps the James Webb in terms of what it's going to reveal to Urantians about astronomy in the next 10 years. because the Vera C Rubin telescope is massive, and it will reveal more of the cosmos than all other optical telescopes throughout history. Now that's huge. I mean, every 72 hours, it's going to map the entire southern hemisphere. Take those pictures, store them. The next 72 hours, it's going to do it again and again and again. And over 10 years, there's going to be an array of the southern sky that's going to show us amazing new things about the universe. And it's just really an exciting thing. It's huge. It's massive, it's wonderful, and it's up and running. Give it 10 years, and you're going to see a much, much different universe than the one we see today. Now, another thing, you'll just quickly, there's a glossary here that you do need to know some of these words, especially aphelion, which is the point of an orbit farthest from the sun. Astronomical units, because one astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the sun. You also need to know the ecliptic, which is the orbital plane of the Earth around the sun, as distinguished from the equator, which is different from our sun's, from the solar system's ecliptic. You need to know what ethnos are, and we're going to get into those. The perihelion, and that's the point of an orbit that is nearest to the sun. Retrograde motion, be sure you know what that is, and you will. And tidal theory, that's really important too. The Titius-Bode's law is really not a law. It is a rule. And the rule is a mathematical rule that spaces and predicts the spacing between the planets in any given planetary system. And it's amazing. Every one of our planets in our solar system adhere to the Titius-Bode's law, except Neptune. Neptune should be at 38.8 astronomical units, but it's not. It's at 30.07. Now, what's interesting about that is how in the world did it escape Bode's law? Well, I don't know. Maybe it just hadn't gotten there yet. That's one theory. Another theory, it was knocked back. Another theory is where it's just right where, it's just a rule. It's not a law. So Neptune's right where it's supposed to be. So, I mean, again, we got lots of known unknowns. And Neptune is a huge unknown. But we're going to get into Neptune later in this presentation. Now, first of all, you need to know what the Kuiper Belt is. Because the Kuiper Belt has two populations. One, the cold classical, and two, the hot classical. Now, the cold and hot does not mean temperature. Cold just means they're stable, they're just in situ, right where they are. They're not moving around, they're just kind of floating right there. Now, the hot classicals, well, we're going to get into those big time, because those hot classicals, they seem to cluster, some with extremely long anomalous elliptical orbits. Unlike the cold classicals, though, they are greatly tilted away from the ecliptic. And the many dwarf planets make up the ethnos, and they orbit close to or within the gravity influence of Neptune. Now, the cold classicals are circulate around the sun about 42 to 47 AU. And that's where the short period comets originate. Halley's Comet, that's one that comes from the cold classical area. So it's really important to realize that we have two completely different populations in the Kuiper Belt. And that's going to be very significant in this discussion as we go forward. Now, these guys are rock stars, okay? They're literally astrophysical rock stars. They're given so much credit recently for the search for Planet 9. Actually, Konstantin Batygin is actually a rock star in his own right. He's a lead guitar player in a rock band in California. Now, he is also an amazing mathematician, Konstantin is. And Mike Brown's an observational astrophysicist. He actually has found several etnos. He found Sedna. And like him or not, he is primarily the one who did away with Pluto as a planet. He put it in the Kuiper Belt, and honestly, I agree with him. Pluto is not a planet of Angona extrusion. But these guys are on it. They are determined to discover Planet 9. They work out of Caltech, and they have a belief that that this Planet 9 is about 7 times the mass of Urantia, and that it orbits about 20 degrees below the solar system ecliptic. Its perihelion is the closest it gets is about 200 AU, and its aphelion is way out there, close to the Oort cloud, actually, at 1200 AU. And so it travels in a very wide elliptical orbit around the sun. It takes about 10,000 to 20,000 years to make one orbit around the sun. So let's see what they're talking about here. Here is this amazing Planet 9. And here it is, and it's circulating out here, and it's getting all these etnos, and it's clustering them. And their theory is it's pushing these things out in these wild, elongated elliptical orbits. And it's just amazing how far out these elliptical orbits go for these etnos. Now, all these etnos, they're called etnos because they are close to Neptune in their approach, in their perihelion. They're very close to Neptune. But look at the longest. Now, see the Planet 9, there's no way that Planet 9 could be a part of the Angona extrusion. It's way, way too far out, and it's not in the ecliptic, and it's certainly doesn't adhere to Bode's law. But let's just use a thumbnail of it right here. But if we go to the next slide, they're saying it's even bigger. Look at this. It is absolutely clustering all of these etnos, pushing them out into these wild anomalous elliptical orbits. And well, let's look at it even a little farther. Let's make it even bigger. Oh my goodness. It's really a lot of those etnos that are being, here is a Planet 9. It's not really to scale really very well. It looks too circular, but you get the idea. There's so many of these etnos out here that it seems like something is causing these etnos to go crazy with these elliptical orbits. We've got to figure out what it is. Why in Monmatia does this happen? Well, I do have some ideas. I have 3 interrelated anticipatory theories on the cosmogony of Monmatia. Number 1, the fate of the 3 major planets stolen from Angona make for evidence for a possible Planet 9. My theory will be that Planet 9 is one of these 3 major planets, which we are told in paper 57 were indeed stolen from Angona. Number 2, the cold Kuiper Belt is a consequence of tidal disruptions among Neptune, possibly, and planets 10, 11, and 12. Now we know the Urantia Book tells us that we had a planet 10, 11, 12. Well, where are they? Nobody has found them. And it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't have been found if they are there, because they're not that far away from our telescopic scientific availability today. Well, let's look at number 3 here. Planet Y may be found beyond the Kuiper Belt in the next 10 years as a cause of the anomalous orbits. Now, planet Y is, again, it's a mathematical construct. Planet 9 is a mathematical construct. They have not been found, but Neptune was found by a mathematical construct. So that's the way they're finding these things these days. And planet Y seems to be out there about a little less than 200. I'll get into this a little later, but a little less than 200 AU. And maybe it's planet 12. I mean, who knows? I mean, we've got to do our speculating here and do a little confirmation bias if we are so guilty. So let's get going. 1. Now I'm going to read this hypothesis because I think it really does encapsulate exactly what I'm trying to say about this. The hypothesis is one of the 3 major Angona planets that collided with Venus and sent it into severe retrograde motion. Massive debris from the Venus collision could have been the reason that between 100 billion and 200 billion years ago, when enormous space bodies contributed to Urantia's massive growth, bombardments in the inner solar system were tremendous. The unknown timing of the second major planet that was captured from Angona, I speculate, impacted Uranus, sending the mini-moons of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune into retrograde motion. It sent massive debris into the Kuiper Belt, resulting in elliptical orbits near Neptune. Now, dwarf planets and smaller objects were quickly influenced by Planet 9 and our Planet Y, sending them into extreme anomalous orbits. Now, Planet 9, if found, cannot be a planet from the Angona extrusion. If it is found as predicted, it is postulated in this study that it is a 3rd major planet that's stolen from Angona and responsible for some of the ethnos that exhibit retrograde behavior. So within 10 years, we're going to find out if this is true. And if not, well, we still have to discover what in the world is causing these ethnos, because something is, and we've got to figure it out. Science is always curious, and it will always be curious about this. But boy, it's exciting to think and to anticipate what's going to be coming in the next 10 years. Now, the retrograde motion that occurs in paper 57, the 3 tributaries injected new and foreign directional forces into the emerging solar system, with the resultant appearance of the retrograde motion. No retrograde motion ever appears except in a system containing masses which have diverse origins. Now, this is my theory that Venus, the reason it's turned upside down, it's completely upside down. It's in a severe retrograde position. And there's only one thing that could cause that, in my opinion, and that is a huge collision. And that huge collision, I'm also speculating, is what caused those enormous space bodies that collided with the Earth, making it as big as it is today, because it used to be a heck of a lot smaller. Now, the really important one is to look at, in terms of the Kuiper Belt, is Uranus, because Uranus was completely tilted on its side. And I think the only way that could have occurred is by a major, major impact by one of the three major planets stolen from Angona. Now, here's a use your imagination here. But let's imagine this is Uranus, okay? Uranus is getting impacted, and here it is. This is the major planet, a major planet from Angona. And it's impacting Uranus, turning it on its side. And as it does so, it ejects all of these massive amounts of debris into the Kuiper Belt. And it's blown off into the direction of the Kuiper Belt. And you can see it going that way in this speculative version that I'm showing you. And then we'll get a little further into that. There it goes. All the ethnos I am saying are caused by this amazing collision with Uranus that sent all these items into these elliptical orbits. And they all kind of glommed around Neptune. So those ethnos do. So, like I said, use your imagination there that this is what's happening, because I sure am. Now, look, this is what came out of it. This is the Kuiper Belt, hot classical dwarf planets and ethnos. And these are all the ones, Mike Brown found several of these. And these are many of those dwarf planets that are out there in these wild, wild, wild elliptical orbits. And Pluto's not in a wild elliptical orbit, but it's in an elliptical orbit. And so, when you look at all of these, you're saying, well, so basically what these are made up of is not just Uranus, it's also made up of Angona planets that came out and they were extruded from that amazing collision that happened with Uranus. There they are. Now, this is a fun to look at all of the ways that every planet was impacted in some way, causing some motion, some collisional motion. Now, as Mercury, boy, it's right on. It's straight up and down. But you see how Venus is turned absolutely upside down. And Earth, with those, it got a little precession there. And it certainly had to have gotten that because of those enormous space bodies that hit it. Well, Mars got hit. Even Ceres, it's straight up and down pretty much. Jupiter, it's pretty straight up and down. Saturn got knocked on its side. Uranus got super knocked on its side. Neptune did too, but not that much. Pluto, it's way off. But there are alternative theories to Planet 9. You have to be honest about that. But if you look at this, you'll see, if you look at my paper, you'll see all of these reasons that Planet 9 does not exist. So we've got to keep that in aware. We've got to be aware that this is not a done deal, okay? Now, next, there are 7 possible bombardment sources, and I'm going to go by this. But the point of it is that all the bombardments sort of give a timeline for when, for the way that Monmatia was created. So, I mean, you can look at them. Again, take a picture if you want to. I'm not going to go into that, but because I don't have time. But there are bombardments occurred. I'm just crazy. Actually, Monmatia is made up of 2 things. It's made up of bombardments, and it's made up of Angona extrusion. A really, really unique Monmatia. And actually, I wanted to say this earlier, but I think one of the reasons that Michael chose Urantia it's a minor reason for sure, but is because we had such an unusual origin of our solar system. Very unusual. And it makes our science more difficult to understand. So we've got a little problem here, and that's understanding Monmatia. If it was a planetesimal deal, it'd be easy. I mean, relatively easy to figure out what's going on. But so those are bombardments. So number two, my second is that the hypothesis is that tidal disruptions among the three outer planets resulted in the cold classical Kuiper Belt long ago, similarly as to how or when the asteroid belt was formed long, long ago. We don't know how long ago that was, but it was long, long ago from tidal disruption of Planet 5. The tidal disruptions among the three outer planets, or maybe Neptune, resulted in the Kuiper Belt. The cold classicals seem to be very old and undisturbed, which would support speculation that the tidal disruptions occurred very early in the evolution of Monmatia. The Kuiper Belt, the cold Kuiper Belt, is now severely depleted due to the massive bombardments that were scattered throughout the solar system. The cold classicals settled into a circular orbit near the ecliptic, aligning its remnants as expected from the Angona extrusion. So it's in a circular orbit and it's in the ecliptic, near the ecliptic. It's not totally on it, but it's near it enough to make it, yeah, it's in the ecliptic. So that is, we don't know where those missing planets are, so I'm going to speculate that they disrupted. Now, how can I say that with any certainty? I can't. But I can say that it is very common that they happen. It is very common that lesser bodies absolutely do this type of tidal disruption. It's not uncommon. Now, major things like Angona and the Sun, those are rare. But tidal theory frequency is supported with this quote: gravity tidal explosions of lesser bodies are quite common. So that's why I think that that's what happened. And I don't know how or which ones or when. I can't go there. But I think that that's what happened. They were tidally disrupted and settled into the cold classical area between 42 and 47 AU. Now, there it is again. I want to make it clear that there's a difference between collisions and tidal gravity tidal disruptions. There's a big difference because there's pass-bys which cause tidal disruptions, but there are collisions which cause huge bombardments. So I just want to make that distinction between the two. Now, my third is the possible planet Y behind the Kuiper Belt. Well, considering tidal disruption of the outer planets as the cause of the Kuiper Belt, it can be postulated, studies show, that at least one of the three outer space system planets may have survived behind the Kuiper Belt, the so-called planet Y. It is mathematically calculated to be a Mars-sized planet situated behind the Kuiper Belt at probably less than 200 AU and may be a contributing or sole cause of ethno behavior. It is postulated to be a survivor of the two smaller outer planets that may have been victims of tidal eruption. And if discovered, planet Y would only be considered a solar system planet if it is on the ecliptic and has a circular orbit around the sun. And part two is about the tidal disruption of Planet 5, which is the source of the asteroid belt. Because James Hopgood Johns was the source author in the 1929 book, The Universe Around Us, where his ideas were completely validated by the Urantia papers in paper 57. So this is really huge because his theories have been discredited. So, but basically, the problem, of course, is that the ecliptic is about 7 degrees above the equator. And that doesn't make sense. The planetesimals should all be along the equator because of the angular momentum and the spin of the sun should keep it all in the equator. But no, it went up. It went up north or south and caused the ecliptic to be above the equator. Now that's what Engona caused, as we believe from the Urantia papers. Um, but there is opposition to that, and this is what we got to deal with. And well, the analysis is that they found separate iron meteorites from the asteroid belt, and they're different from each other. So they couldn't have come from they had to have come from different sources, from a single world, and that similarities would be uniformly evident. Now, the asteroid belt could not have formed from a tidally disrupted planet because current estimates of the total mass of the asteroid belt is 4% of the mass of the moon. Well, I discredit that by saying, well, the asteroid belt used to be big, but bombardments have absolutely decimated it completely. And all that's left is 4%. Now, a planet did not form because of the constant jostling by Jupiter's gravity. But even astronomer Edward Herrick Gleason of Astronomy magazine says, well, we can't assert that no planet ever existed between Mars and Jupiter. We can't ever say that it's highly unlikely one ever did. Well, we'll see if he's right there. What was Engona? Engona was a black hole that probably evolved by accretions. Science is seeing these accretions of black holes, mainly from neutron stars that go into black holes. And so I'm speculating that this enormous Engona system was a black hole, highly charged, and that was probably being positioned to be somewhere out there because there are no unseen accidents in the universe. But it was probably unusual that it came so close to our sun. So, to conclude, I would just like to say, what is next? In 10 years, will we know so much more about the cosmogony of Monmatia? I believe we will. We will have so much more evidence about what is going on in the Kuiper Belt with these ethnos, with the what's going on with maybe the discovery of Planet 9, the discovery of Planet Y, maybe some other completely new theory that we're going to have to deal with that's causing it. It's just so dead-gum exciting. Obviously I'm excited about it. It really does give me a thrill to do this. And I want to thank you all so much. And remember, truth never suffers from honest examination. And I also like to say that curiosity about all of these scientific explanations, curiosity is the root cause of all of our work here with this scientific symposium. And I would like to say I am curious, and everybody here is curious what in the world is going on in science and in the last 100 years as it comports or doesn't with the Urantia papers.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Great talk. I loved your graphics. Your pictures were fantastic. Well, who would like to start our discussion? Andre has got his hand up, so let's go, Andre.
So I've got a question that probably a lot of Urantia Book readers do. Okay, as someone who's drank their dwarf planets are not planets Kool-Aid. Just retroanalyzing a little bit, the revelators didn't have that concept available to them. So when they were predicting planets, it may have been possible that what they were doing was referring to what we now call dwarf planets as well. And since that time, we have made discoveries of maybe too many, looking at Makemake and, some of these others, they just may not qualify. So I follow you there. But Eris, is even more massive than Pluto. Pluto had been discovered by Clyde Tombaugh. And in fact, Jim McNelly will say that Clyde Tombaugh was aware of somebody who knew about the Urantia papers coming through in the forum, not just Percival Lowell stuff. So I'll put that aside for a moment. But if that's the case, then we may have had some of the discovery of that. What makes you think, as a part one to this question, that this would disqualify, say, Eris and Pluto from being considered some of the planets that would be part of the original 12? And as a follow-on, not really related, but somewhat related question, even though planet Y would be is probably well outside the ecliptic, would it not at least qualify from the theory of the revelators as giving evidence of one of the major planets of Angona that had been captured by Monmatia doing all that gravitational disruption out there?
Well, thank you, Andre. There are so many alternatives, and I'm sure the rest of you guys and gals will probably come up with some other alternative ideas about what it is. But still, the question remains, why are Pluto and Eris and Makemake and Korma and all those, why are they in such crazy elliptical orbits? What caused it? Now, maybe you'll say Planet Nine. I'm not sure, but if you're going to call them planets 10 and 11, maybe Planet Y number 12. Well, let's work on that. I mean, that's just another theory, another speculation, Andre, that might be true. So let's work on that.
And why would Planet Nine not also qualify as not being one of the Monmatian planets, since that's clearly well outside of the ecliptic in terms of its predicted orbit?
Well, the reason it's not an Angona extrusion is because it's so elliptical.
Yeah,
The perihelion and the aphelion are so different, and it's not on the ecliptic, and it's not circular. And if to be an Angona extrusion planet, it's got to be on the ecliptic, and it has to be circular.
sure.
And
I
that
got it.
doesn't.
So your reference to Planet Nine is only in terms of, contemporary astronomers. They're looking at it as that's the Planet Nine. Gotcha. And why is Planet Y called Planet Y?
Well, but actually, I mean, this is minutia. It's called Planet Nine by most people, but there are astronomers who say no, call it Planet X and Planet Y.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
That's why it's done that. So
Gotcha.
actually, nine for us is not right.
Okay.
We should
All
probably
right. Thanks.
Yeah, let's let Jeff weigh in here, please.
Well, I had pretty much the same question as Andre. Where do you count planets, or how do you count planets? Um, if I count planets, I count Pluto, Haumea, Makemake, Iris, and then you get to 12. You get the base. So it's just a function of size. So if it's too small, don't count it. If it's too big, don't count it, or do count it. But possibly, are there 12 in say a 10 or 7.2 to 10 degree ecliptic? Would that bracket the appropriate number 12?
Well, it would have to be. Planet, yeah, if it's planet Y, if planet Y turns out to be discovered, it would need to be in the ecliptic and it need to be circular in order for it to have been an Angona extrusion planet. So, I mean, wait and see if it's found.
Well, okay, but how do you count 12? And while we're on it, how would you count the inner five and the outer five?
In terms of what do you mean by counting them?
Um, 5757 says there's 12 planets. Um, how how do you count the inner five and the outer five for because that they reference that as well, right?
I do, and the gas planets are the ones that are out there, and the last five, and the first five are the well, I say the gas giants started Jupiter beyond, and then the rocky planets are earlier.
Okay. The other point I'd like to make here is that the term Monmatia has an interesting etymology. Mon being man, Ma being mother, and Tia being place. So it's the place for mom and dad.
Sweet, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Tim.
So, Tom, I got a few things. So first, I'll hit some of the paper 57 quotes. You referenced the expulsion from the back of the sun, and it's like a bunch of meteors and stuff, but basically in your paper, you call out that it contributed to the asteroids. And other than that assertion on your part, I can't find that in the Urantia book at all. That's number one. Number two is at the end of 5758, the last line of that paragraph is the visiting system did not come quite close enough to actually steal any of the sun's substance, but it did swing sufficiently close to draw off into the intervening space, and this is the key word, all of the material comprising the present day solar system. So that seems to be in conflict as the Urantia book thing to later say, that it captured three major planets, which it doesn't distinguish in the 12. They didn't say any of them were major. They just happened to call these three major. So that's something I'm trying to sort out and would appreciate your feedback on. But as far as the collisions in the inner planets, if it is Uranus and it is Venus, the collisions, I try to read between the lines of how you presented this, and if I'm reading into what you're saying, it's as though the planets that there's a collision, that some of the Angana stolen planets managed to like crash into Venus to create the tilt of the axis, and yet Venus, even though it just came out of the sun as plasma not too long before, presumably, at some point this crash occurs, and it's as though it's not a glancing blow. It's as though it somehow crashes in a way that this major planet somehow fragments and disintegrates, but Venus is able to stay within the plane of the ecliptic. And that just, I'm not disagreeing that that's not plausible, but it seems kind of unlikely. So to what extent do we have, like on a pool table, where you have the cue ball hits the ball you're hitting and the cue ball just stops cold and the thing goes off? So as I read your paper and I went through the text, I didn't find anything would disallow that the 12 planets are created, and then when the collision occurs, that Venus could go, the original Venus could go sailing off into wherever, or disintegrate or whatever, and the captured planet from Angana take up its place. So that's enough yapping from my side. Anyway, thanks, Tom. You did a great job.
Thank you, Tim. Well, first of all, it is in the Urantia book where the Angona extrusion affected both sides of the sun. And some of that stuff on the opposite side of the sun was extruded on the opposite direction of Angona. And it is in the book. Look a little harder because it does say most of it was recaptured by the sun. And they use the word most. And the word most is not quantifiable. How much is most? So there could be still a huge quantity of meteorites that occurred from that opposite side of the sun extrusion. Now, it would take a lot of mathematical science, and it would also take a known unknown, which is how big was that planet that smacked Venus? Now, it could have happened a long time ago, but I think it happened 200 billion to 100 billion years ago. And Venus would have had plenty of time to recover and to create its circular, spherical shape again. While half of it went off into space, and half of the major planet accrued to Venus. Now, whether or not it would have been thrown out like a billiard ball, I mean, science in a macro way would need a lot of scientific and mathematical work. But we'd have to know how big that major planet was. We'd have to know what angle it hit at. And Urantia Book didn't tell us.
Okay. All right, Josh, you're up.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Tom. Excellent presentation. So I had a question about Neptune. You mentioned early in the presentation that there was some anomalies about Neptune that you were going to bring up, and I don't know if I missed that or you just ran out of time. But one of my questions is, have you considered Neptune being a captured planet from Angona?
Well, no, because it's on the ecliptic and it's circular in its orbit. So that's enough for me to say that it's a planet from Angona.
Okay, I'm going to read Andre's. So you state in your paper that there is, quote, no way, unquote, to retroanalyze either the trajectory of the three, quote, captured, unquote, Angona system planets from seeing what planets and Monmatia satellites have retrograde motion, nor Angona's trajectory. Why not?
Well, I mean, the retrograde motion is clearly there with all the moons of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune.
Not talking about the retrograde motion. Why can't we retroanalyze in the same way that we can look at gravitational anomalies and predict that should be a planet 9 here or a planet Y there? Why can we not retroanalyze and try and determine the trajectory of some object somewhere out there that would be Angona? Why do you say that that's impossible? Okay.
Well, I mean, retrograde, I don't understand that. You want to try to figure out mathematically?
Well, let me ask you, do you believe you can find this out? Do you believe that it's possible? Like, for instance, Tim's idea is not untoward, neither is Josh's, that okay, you would expect it, you would expect the probabilities would say that these objects would be well outside the ecliptic, if they were captured objects. However, if the trajectory was just right, if it hit another planet just right, or if it didn't hit, I mean, these things could have just sideswiped planets. I think if they were major planets, they could have easily sideswiped them. And it could be I mean, did we actually capture them permanently? Or if we did capture them, do they have wildly distant orbits now and eccentric orbits? So there's any number of things that we can be talking about here.
Well, it is speculation. Of course, I speculate that they were annihilated when they collided with Venus and Uranus. And we don't know.
But we don't know that they collided. That's
No,
highly improbable.
oh, I don't think it's improbable. I mean, well, why is Venus turned on its side? I would love to have another theory about that. I think Josh might have one. Is that
Okay,
right?
Josh, wait, get in here and the rough and tumble of the argument. That's what we like here. Weigh on
Well,
in.
well, I guess my question is why would you think that it has to be a collision and not a near pass? Now, if Angona system, it's an enormous star. These are major planets. So in my mind, I'm thinking they're big planets, maybe Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune size. So if a planet like that were to hit Venus, I can't imagine Venus surviving that. But if a planet like that came really close to Venus, I can imagine Venus getting flipped around, turned upside down. So I guess my question is, is that possible, do you think?
Well, the problem is that tidal disruption would occur if it got too close. Be it whether or not Venus would be bigger than the major planet, or the major planet is bigger than Venus, there would be a tidal disruption if it just passed by and hit the Roche's limit of tidal disruption. But so that's why I'm sticking with collision. But otherwise, also, I think collision, because where else did the enormous space bodies come from? I can't imagine that in the inner solar system that those enormous, unless you want to say they came from the asteroid belt, then maybe they did. But I'm sticking with Venus and all the debris that occurred when there was a collision with Venus. Another thing, Josh, is you did ask me about Neptune earlier, and I guess my speculation is that maybe Venus, or maybe Neptune, is the cause of the Kuiper Belt disruptions that occurred with planets 10 and 11. I don't know if that's true, and I certainly can't try to figure that out right now. But I just threw it in there because there's a possibility that Neptune, there was a close encounter with Neptune causing it. But that'll take a lot more work on my part to figure that out.
Okay, Tim, you're up now.
57,514. I mean, it says right in there that retrograde motion, it requires a collisional impact. I would like, if I didn't read this book, I didn't believe in this book, my mind would say, no, it could be strong, it could come by, and somehow some forces could interact between the two space bodies and cause the retrograde motion. But it says collisional impact. That's the only way. So that's actually specifically spelled out there. So back to the deal about the tilt and the angle of approach. Tom, you called out, we don't really know the tilt of the Angona system. We don't know the angle of approach. The only clue there to me, because I had investigated for a while looking at whether the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy had come up through the Milky Way, and possibly the Angona system was in that as it passed by. But the thing is, even as they tell us of these different extrusions that are occurring from the sun, it wasn't just this one major one that came out. There were other ones that were also pulled out and did not fall all the way back. And if there was a system that didn't have some kind of a way that the gravity was acting in the plane that the extrusion occurred, if it was passing by, even though it took a long time to go by, if it was passing by and essentially interacting with the sun at different angles, we wouldn't have everything all in the same elliptic. It would be spread out. So that's the only evidence that it kind of gives us a clue where the angle of approach. It had to be coplanar in some way, it would seem like, as opposed to not.
You know, Tim, I have thought about that, is the angle that it must have come in at, you know. But you know, the thing is that those planets were captured very soon after Angona came by, which would only be, I mean, maybe only 100 million years. Now, 100 million years is not much time, but I think that Venus was impacted about 2 billion years ago. In other words, that major planet would have made many orbits and not touched a thing. But eventually, poor Venus got in the way. Boom, got it. But it took billions of years to make that happen. So it takes time. You got to think in billions of years when you're talking about Monmatia. And that stretches the mind for sure. But the angle of approach is really, that is fascinating because Planet 9 does not have that angle of approach. There's no way that Planet 9 is going to hit any of the planets of Monmatia. So why did the other two do that? Well,
yeah, so I did want to sort of question, not contradict what you're saying, but with regard to Angana being a black hole, I'm wondering about the highly charged part, because both neutron stars and black holes, which usually neutron stars, black holes don't have a lot of charge. They do to some extent right outside the event horizon, but they don't really qualify as highly charged. So I don't know what they would be talking about, but I have a problem with just jumping on the idea that it's a black hole in the face of their use of the term highly charged.
well, that's my confirmation bias.
Now, there you go.
I know. I think Jeff, I think you agree. Do you know that the dark? Well, there's another thing. Dark giants of space are only mentioned a couple of times in terms of Angona. Now, dark islands of space are like those massive black holes in the center of galaxies, but the Urantia Book uses them interchangeably. So
Yeah.
it confuses me. But I would say that they're black holes to some degree in some way, but I tell you, the science escapes me as just a guy, a mathematician that can only add, subtract, divide, and multiply, and maybe a square root. I just have to say, well, that's kind of what they're talking about, the same thing. But I don't know. I'd love to see that more thoroughly investigated because it seems like to me they're the same thing.
All right.
Okay, let me read a question from the audience. We have the number here. This one is from Don Crownover, and Don says, Tom, I have always waited for the discovery with new telescopes, the large planetary system in the UV that passed our sun while it was going into convulsions, spewing out matter that created the planets. This large planetary system pulled large sums from the sun and left one of its planets in our system going retrograde with the other planets. Will this big system come back around, and have we discovered it, or are we going to discover it?
Well, one of the objections to James John's prescient theory, well, James John's really tried to figure out that it was a star, but we know it was a black hole. It was something big. It wasn't a star because we couldn't find a star out there. That was one of the objections to John's. There's not a star that could have been in our neighborhood that had time to come by here. So he's wrong. But we're saying it's an Angona. Now, I did find some studies, some observations where they see black holes actually in orbit around um, stars. And a black hole that's it's basically kind of like fishing for that star, I think. It's kind of waiting to get it and absorb it and bring it into its little place. So Angona, boy, I think it's long gone. And unless it was kind of directed to be one of these dark giants of space that is actually in orbit around another star. It's just the possibilities are endless. So that's a good question, though. I mean,
Right. Yeah. I mean, we think we have the latest and greatest in telescopes. I mean, and they keep telling us that these things happen. Well, shouldn't we be able to see where after it left here, which way did it go and where is it? So,
those are the unknowns.
yeah, right, right.
We know
Okay,
about 7 degrees off the ecliptic.
yeah.
We're a little bit off when they came by. 7 degrees. Let's see, what's that? About 7 degrees.
So could you propose a tract somewhere out and wherever, and if we had a telescope view, would we see it if we looked?
Well, telescopes are very, the difficulty in finding these dark giants is that they're dark.
Mhm.
Optical telescope can't find them. The only way to find them is through their gravity influence. And the reason
Right, you have to look at other stars and see how they're affecting their motion. Right.
they're
Yeah.
finding them, and they're finding a lot of them now.
Right, because they bend the light, the stars over there, and they bend the light so you can tell that they're there, but you can't see them. So I find that interesting. I love the math on that. It's just great. Okay, this is from Tom O'Keefe. Uh, it says, Tom, why do astronomers still hold to this ridiculous theory that big rocks bumped into planets in our system, knocking them off the sun's equatorial plane, rather than because of the merging of other, and he's saying galaxies with nebula. In other words, he thinks that we're merging, which pull them out of the plane. Anyone can see that that the outer planets have a larger tilt than the inner planets. That's his first question. Second question, I don't understand because I don't understand the vernacular here. Secondly, what's your take on three little I stroke atlas? I have no idea what that is. Does anybody know
Oh,
what that?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Well, first of all, the tilt.
Okay.
The tilt is the reason that science today says, well, no, the tilt is because there were geomagnetic influences that boosted the ecliptic up in that direction. I mean, whenever there's a problem with gravity, they always blame it on geomagnetism. And so that's what there's a geomagnetic problem. The sun kind of, went up a little bit, and that's what caused it. So done deal. Don't investigate any further. One of my, that we found 3 interstellar objects in the last 6 years, and these are objects from outside the solar system. They're passing by, and three eye atlas is one of them. It's the biggest one, and you know what? It almost hit Mars. It came close. Now, maybe that could have been one of the enormous space bodies from an interstellar that came through. That's another possibility. Because if 3 of them came through, they're comet-like. They were small. These are relatively small. Three Eye Atlas is one of the biggest ones. It's the biggest one of the 3. And but maybe some dwarf planet, interstellar, or wildly came through and hit the Earth, hit anybody else, any other planet in the system. It could have happened. So that's one of the speculations you can make about it. But it's going to be gone pretty soon, and we'll just have a memory of it.
So if Three Eye Atlas hit Mars, would it have had enough? Was it big enough to either change Mars's orbit or knock it or whatever? How, I mean, and relate, was it as big as the moon, or was it smaller than the moon, or?
Question. That's a good question. How it would have impacted something like Mars, because I don't know the size. I don't know the size. Exactly.
Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, those are all kind of interesting. This one really, I think the whole panel may want to kind of surmise on this one because it's not really about our solar system. It's more about our local universe. And this is from Don Crownover again. It says, Tom, I recently read and have seen images created from the Gaia Space Telescope scans mapping the Milky Way. There is one major hot pocket area of new star activity in the Milky Way, all around our solar system. He put an exclamation point. I don't understand this because Mother Spirit is the creator of physical systems according to Michael's pattern. However, she cannot do creating and mercy mission at the same time. Her physical creations for Navadon ended upon the quote, marriage, unquote, scenario, explaining with Michael after he announced life is next to be created. So who is participating in the new star activity, possibly by both together in the new and equal rulership of Nebadon, power creatures, power centers? He just wants to know what when we see these areas that are hot pockets, what do you think is going on there?
Well, the Mother Spirit. Thank you, Mother Spirit. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
She is the one who has the power of anti-gravity. And I don't doubt that she's kind of swirling some things around. Back in the day, Michael couldn't leave the Nebadon hotspot because they had to get everything and they had to kind of manage everything from the nebula that created Nebadon. What's the name of it? I'm blanking out. So what the Mother Spirit is probably using a lot of anti-gravity. I don't know if she used any in Monmatia. Well, because they're saying it's always accidents that cause these collisions. So otherwise, she's working hard to get get all these planets in the right space. Working hard with Michael to do it, and I'm so appreciative of them.
Yeah, me too. Go Mother Spirit. Yes, for sure. Okay, Josh, and then Tim again, please.
Yeah, so if 3I Atlas hit Mars, it might kill all the dinosaurs there on Mars.
That's
So I had a
great.
question about your you said tidal disruptions of the 3 outer planets possibly resulted in the Kuiper Belt. Are you talking about 3 outer planets that were part of the original 12 that were pulled from our sun, or are you talking about uh, possible captures from Angona?
No, not captures from Angona. These are just they got into wild orbits and they got too close to each other and did the same thing that the asteroid belt did. It disrupted it and sent it into what it is today. Basically, I don't think it's from Angona.
Okay.
Okay, Marjorie, first of all, thanks for all your service here.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I love these discussions. I just get really excited.
Yeah, so Tom, I'm going to go a little outside of what you presented here, but you brought up that this, the Urantia book, the solar extrusion is a form of creating the solar system different than the nebular hypothesis. But in the current cosmological realm, they talk about heavy metals, they talk about first generation, second generation, third generation, and so on stars, and they say our sun is a population 1 star, a third generation star because of the heavy metals. And I'll try and make this quick because this could go on forever. So in our case, if we look at the Andronomer Nebula, which was the name of our nebula, and we look at that we were our sun was part of the terminal disruption, and they tell us as they tell us the story, there are a lot of suns that are cast off and then they fall back into the nebula. Well, they effectively in the nebula star nursery, they effectively are now already, it's Gen 2 stuff that's in the nebula. So if it sends out the terminal disruption, our sun is probably a second generation star at that time. But if it was in the case of a nebular hypothesis, basically there's supposed to be a heavy metal cloud of gas that as the sun coalesces or condenses, and then so do the planets, that those planets have, heavy metals in them. But basically in the extrusion case, you kind of get to skip a generation because the sun is making, it was already Gen 2 and now it's making itself into a Gen 3. And then its own material is sucked out, and now you have heavy material planets. And there should be something in there that can be analyzed in terms of whether that's really the case, that normally you have the star is really a different generation than the planets, and ours are really the same. Anyway, just a point of thought since you brought it up.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, Tim. Jeff, you've got your hand up. We've got about 3 minutes. So
These should be quick and easy for Tom. His favorite observatory, the Vera Rubin, can it do 3D parallax movements? Are we going to get some outer space counter motion measurements out of that? And the other question is a quick one. How come junk sometimes forms a planet and sometimes forms an asteroid belt?
Well, the asteroid belt is because of tidal disruption.
But why does it stay an asteroid belt? Why didn't it just clump together and form bigger lumps?
Maybe that's because Jupiter is jostling it too much. But that's a good question. And I also think that maybe Ceres was a moon of Planet 5 that escaped the tidal disruption and is now in the asteroid belt. And that's one of my crazy theories, but I like it.
Anyway, thank you. Great presentation. Good stuff.
okay, Tom, do you want to make any final comment, or anybody else?
I want everybody to keep thinking about this that's interested. And, because we've got to figure this out. We got to stay curious. We got to want to know more, well, about all these scientific topics.